After today's featured conversation, I'll be playing a clip from a public broadcast our guest appeared on. It's from 92.7 WMAY Springfield's News and Talk Radio, and I'm sharing it because I found it especially insightful. Ray Long will be joining me on this episode of
The Cole Memo.
The Cole Memo.
The Cole Memorandum.
The Cole Memo.
The Cole Memorandum.
The Cole Memo.
The Cole Memo is what allows this whole thing to go on.
I mean, you have to respect the memo.
Hey, this is Tommy Chong, and you're listening and watching The Cole Memo.
I'm sitting back down with Ray Long today. In case you missed it, I recently had Ray on the show. That would be episode 188, where we talked about his book, The House That Madigan Built. I'll put that link in the show notes if you'd like to check that out. It was recently brought to my attention that Ray, alongside some fellow Chicago Tribune journalists, wrote an article headlined, Governor J.B. Pritzker, Lawmakers Moving Sluggishly on Illinois Ethics Law Reforms Despite Uptick in Convictions. I wanted to bring Ray on the show to talk about this article. Ray, welcome back.
Thank you very much, Cole. Good to be here again. Thank you.
Yeah, and let's get right into it. Tell my audience about this article. I found it really interesting to read that 11 now former lawmakers have pled guilty or been convicted at trial of crimes during Pritzker's reign in Springfield. Tell us more about this article you and others wrote.
Yeah, that's the context, and that's how we basically started it out. There's been this staggering pace of lawmakers who have been convicted of crimes, most of them public corruption. And there's also one that's like a revenge porn crime that is in state court, but most of these are in federal court. The highest profile one, obviously, was Mike Madigan, and he was convicted in a bribery conspiracy case that dealt with him putting political allies onto ComEd's payroll without ComEd having to put it on their own books because they used a third party, a lobbyist named Jay Doherty, who was convicted in the ComEd 4 case. And so he was this funnel. Doherty acted as this funnel for ComEd to send payments to Madigan allies. And over the years, it was well over $1 million that was sent that way in the Madigan case. So that, of course, is a big marker on the table and an alarm bell, as some say, for more reforms in Illinois. Well, the answer by folks who are doing nothing is basically that, hey, we've got laws on the books that caught them, but they're federal laws, and the state laws have lots of loopholes and lots of escape hatches, and they consistently have not shown any willingness to champion these major flaws in the state laws, and they are showing very little inclination to do that right now. So even though Pritzker's been there 6 years and he's not accused of wrongdoing himself, underneath him in the legislature, there have been 11 guilty or been convicted during trials for various crimes, and I called this a stain on the state government that Pritzker heads. Yet Pritzker says, well, I've pushed for ethical laws every year and we've done a lot. Well, a lot's in the eye of the beholder, and there are many laws that a lot of advocates have talked about that ought to be in place, and they're not unusual, they're not stringent, they're not things that other states have not done. And yet, even this week, Cole, there was an ethics committee hearing scheduled in the House, and for the second consecutive week, that committee hearing was canceled, and there has not been a full hearing on even the subject of ethics reform in this House committee, and there's not in the Senate either. So the advocates think that there is the possibility that there will be an end of session bill emerge out of leadership from the Democratic sides of both chambers, and that is what the advocates fear will be a take it or leave it proposition. And in those cases, over the years, that doesn't necessarily end up with the best effort to try to clean up Illinois government.
Yeah, one of my questions on that note, the kind of the 11th hour ethics package, I just can't help but wonder if that last minute approach is intentional to limit scrutiny or debate or conversation, on the proposal.
Sure, I think your instinct's in the right place. This is not an unusual process, but in Illinois. But I was talking to the head of Common Cause here in Illinois, who had worked in other states, and she said that this is what Illinois does by kind of hiding the ball until they want to pop something out and expect everybody to vote to pass it because it's called ethics reform. She says that's unusual in her experiences in other states. So regardless of how unusual it is or how it gets done, Elizabeth Grossman, the executive director of Common Cause, says by the time the public sees it, it's pretty much baked, and there's not an effort then or not an opportunity really to argue for changes, and that will be one of those times where it is take it or leave it. She even compared it to the old remnant of machine politics.
Gotcha. And it's probably easy for me to say this as an armchair commentarian, but why do I feel like if I were a lawmaker, I would love to be able to come back at the end of session and say, I've cleaned up house. My question is, why does it seem that lawmakers have been so slow to prioritize ethics reforms despite all of these convictions and ongoing scandals? I mean, Illinois has literally in many ways become synonymous with corruption. So why wouldn't they want to clean up shop?
Well, that's the question for the ages, but the speculation and belief by a lot of the advocates is that, hey, the lawmakers got there under the current rules. They found out that those rules are pretty accommodating toward incumbents, and so they have no interest in changing it, or if they do have an interest, they don't have the votes. Governor Pritzker has no interest in trying to upset his Democratic lawmakers who may not want the changes that are proposed, and therefore he doesn't want to ruffle feathers and perhaps upset one of his programs that he's trying to get through. So everybody has an excuse why they don't want to push for it. Pritzker says, I push for ethics all the time, but he's not standing out there championing it. He holds press conferences for grants given here or grants given there, or attacking Donald Trump or going on national TV to attack Donald Trump, but he's not arguing, he's not holding up press conferences and demanding that changes be made to improve the climate in Springfield. And he also falls back on what I called in the story the old Springfield bromide, that hey, they got the folks who got caught because of the laws on the books. He doesn't say though that those laws are federal laws and that the state laws are much weaker.
Right. I was just about to say that, that's the common refrain, as you already mentioned. But what seems to be missing from that conversation is that, those laws that are being broken, those come via charges from the federal government. It doesn't seem like I mean, I don't know. I've not heard of the state government catching any of this activity per se.
Right. When it comes to public corruption, it's rare for the state's attorneys around the state to be bringing cases. Occasionally they do pop up, but they're rare that they're bringing them against state lawmakers. And one of the reasons is because the feds have many more tools at their disposal. For example, one of the ones that lawmakers in Springfield have never been fond of is one that would allow for wiretapping in public corruption cases. We have wiretapping in such things as like gang cases or emergency kidnapping cases or things like that, but we don't have it for public corruption. Well, when you go to federal court and watch federal court unfold with cases against lawmakers, as I have done, you see that they use a lot of wiretaps and other secret recording methods to try to get people on tape committing a crime or admitting to a crime or saying they want to commit a crime, et cetera. So that's a common thing at federal government, and it's also more common in the other states in the United States. There are more states by far that have wiretapping abilities in their states. And Illinois has a law that says you cannot use wiretaps in public corruption cases. So it's an outright no, you can't in Illinois versus yes, you can in other states. And that's just one of a few. There are loopholes in things like the contribution caps that they have. You are basically restricted as to how much money you can take from various entities, and the caps are fairly high, several $1,000s for individuals. They go up tens of thousands of dollars for various groups and PACs. But if you have a wealthy candidate who emerges and puts in $100,000 or more of family money, his personal money or family money, into a race, that breaks the cap, and the opponent can spend as much as he wants. Or I'm sorry, the opponent can collect as much as he wants from contributors too. So that kind of was put in place as a way to even the playing field. The problem has been that that cap breaking procedure has been used by folks who don't even have an opponent. So they break the cap and then can bring in contributions of any size themselves, and that defeats the purpose of the cap. There are other things in there too, Cole, that are blatant and have shown up in real situations. For example, there is something called a coordination ban in state law between regular candidates and super PACs. These are the independent expenditure PACs that do not coordinate with the candidates. They're not supposed to coordinate with candidates. But when there was a challenge against the Republican governor candidate and another big spender in the governor's last campaign, the Democrats filed a complaint with the State Board of Elections, and the State Board said, look, you never defined what coordination is, so we can't hold somebody responsible for that. So that's one more element that is basically an escape hatch or a way to skirt around the rules. If they don't have a definition of what the problem is, then you're not able to hold somebody accountable for a problem. And, you know, there's the revolving door clause that is also hanging out there, where if you are a lawmaker and you're an incumbent, if you resign in the middle of your term, you have to wait 6 months before you can become a lobbyist that would lobby the fellow lawmakers you just left behind. But if you complete your full term in as a lawmaker. You can start as a lobbyist the next day. 6 months alone is one of the weakest revolving door clauses in America among the states. And, you know, ending your term and starting the next day, that's hardly a clause at all. So there are loopholes like that that have been highlighted by many, and we even wrote about them in our own series, Culture of Corruption series that ran last year. And there are plenty of ideas that are out there. The question is whether anybody in Springfield will come up with anything that is sweeping or far reaching, or come back with something that just plays on the edges.
Yeah. And if folks want to check out that series you just referenced, I'll have the link in the show notes. It's chicagotribune.com/corruption. Also, that first tactic you mentioned, I believe you call it the money bomb. I believe it's detailed in the house
Yeah.
that Madigan built. So folks check out that book as well. Just a few more questions for you, 3 actually. And again, thank you for your time. In your story, you reference in the story that we're discussing today, it's referenced the Quinn era Illinois Reform Commission. Curious, would creating a new version of that commission have real teeth, or would it just sort of serve as political theater without any legislative buy-in?
Well, that's the complaint about the Reform Commission. They did
Okay.
get a few things through. They did strengthen, for example, some of the Freedom of Information Act issues. They strengthened some of the procurement purchasing laws to the point where people think they're almost too tough right now, and may cause purchases to be slowed down. And they put in place this contribution cap, the first ever. But I talked about the loophole there that you just
Right.
referred to as the money bomb, as one piece of it. Uh, Patrick Collins, a former federal prosecutor who led the prosecution that put George Ryan, the former governor, in prison for 6 years, was on that Reform Commission. And he said that one of the problems was that there was not ever buy-in from the legislature, at least the leaders of the legislature, which were Democrats at the time, to put every one of their recommendations up for a vote. So what happened was they came out with a report, and then some of the pieces of the report made it through, and other pieces, such as the wiretapping, got no consideration at all, got no traction. And so that is the dilemma that advocates for change face every year.
Gotcha. And the story mentions that Illinois has a high number of overlapping government bodies. I'm pretty familiar with that concept through my coverage on cannabis, where there's like 12 to 14 different regulatory structures over cannabis. Um, is it the lack of structural consolidation that contributes to the corruption problem by diluting like oversight and accountability, or?
Yeah, that's part of it. There are so many governmental bodies in Illinois, like thousands more than any other state. I think Illinois has 8, 9, 10. I can't remember exactly the number, but it's thousands more than Pennsylvania, which is the next highest, and it has more governmental bodies than bigger states like Texas or California. So as a result, there are not enough watchdogs out there to watch all these, including not only government watchdogs, but journalists who are out there to go to the meetings and watch what's going on, or to follow up and see who's getting a secret deal or a sweet deal, etc. So that makes it ripe for corruption, because when nobody's watching the store, there's a tendency for folks to take as much as they can.
Gotcha. And my last question, and we'll get you out of here. Thanks again for your time today. I've personally noticed that like law enforcement agencies and I guess you would call them trade associations, And even regulators sometimes lobby for or against legislation in the very areas that they're tasked with enforcing or overseeing. I recently saw a regulator attending actually a lobby day today with an industry trade association of whom they oversee. There was even recent reports within the last session of Governor Pritzker sending in some of his cannabis regulators to advocate for and against specific bills. And like from my layman perspective, it seems like law enforcement should just be focused on enforcing the law and regulators focusing on implementing it, not influencing what the law should be. And I get that they may be seen as subject matter experts in certain cases, but and I also realize that this question is a little bit unrelated because we've mostly been talking about lawmakers, not necessarily regulators or people within law enforcement. But again, I get that they may be seen as subject matter experts because they're close to all of these topics. But does this cross an ethical line?
I think if they are strict experts and speak to why something would help them control or better regulate, I can see that type of testimony would be good. If they roll into an ideological stance that is to support a political candidate or office holder's position and take an ideological stance, I don't have a really good example of that, but if they're carrying somebody's water for the sake of carrying political water, that becomes more problematic. That becomes an area that could result in issues that could be a conflict.
Fair. Well, Ray, again, just appreciate your work and ultimately really thankful for your time today.
Thank you.
Yep. Once again, folks, I'll have links to the article we discussed today, a link to where you can check out the last episode I did with Ray, where we discussed his book. You could purchase his book and check out that series on the culture of corruption, our culture of corruption at chicagotribune.com/corruption. Ray, thanks. We'll see you on the next one.
Thank you. Thank you, Cole.
All right. So that was my conversation with Ray. And as promised, I wanted to share a clip from 92.7 WMAY Springfield. It's a radio station that I listen to occasionally. And this clip also features Ray. I just felt like it was important to share this because Ray gets into a little bit more than what we got into in the conversation that you just heard. I hope you enjoy this conversation as well and find as much value in it as I did. Here it is. Maybe.
Pleased to welcome our friend Ray Long of the Chicago Tribune, covers state government, and has basically become a courts reporter at this point as well. Ray, a longtime guy who's here in Springfield. How long did you live down here?
Oh, over a quarter of a century, off and on, so Springfield is still a major part of my heart, and my heart goes out to Chatham, obviously, today.
Yeah, we've been talking about that this morning with the 4 deaths there and terrible news out of Chatham this morning. So, Ray, I'm working on something for the newsletter that's probably going to wait till tomorrow, but you wrote something the other day on sort of the lack of ethics reform. Now in the wake of the Madigan conviction, the Emil Jones III trial, which finished in a mistrial, which we can talk about. But so basically what I'm hearing from Democrats is nothing on there's been no discussion of ethics reform in their caucus and seriously among a group. Maybe some stuff is happening behind the scenes or there's going to be a big omnibus at some point, but it is not a major focus here 5 weeks before the end of the legislative session. And it feels like they're just not getting the message that we got to start cleaning this stuff up.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. There's never an appetite in Springfield in the legislature and in the Capitol overall. It's rare to see a big appetite for policing themselves, and they just don't want to put in place sweeping reforms that could hold them to a higher standard. They got into the jobs they have with the rules that are in place, and they have only tweaked them along the way. And as a result, you have alarm bells ringing. Michael Madigan, the longest serving speaker in American history, has been convicted. His sentencing date is in June. And 11 former lawmakers, now former lawmakers, have pleaded guilty or been convicted at trial of crimes since Governor J.B. Pritzker was in office. And Pritzker himself obviously has not been accused of wrongdoing, but he's not out there waving a flag saying that there ought to be more reforms to crack down on lawmakers, to try to put restrictions in place on lobbyists. And there are just no signs that the legislature is anywhere close to gung-ho or ready to put ethics reform at the top of their agenda.
So the stock answer from Democrats in charge, whether it's the governor even yesterday or the speaker or Don Harmon, which we'll talk about Don Harmon, but their answer seems to be, well, these things are already illegal anyway. So they've gotten caught, they've gotten tried, they've gotten convicted in Madigan's case, or a jury had its say in the Emil Jones case. But it's more than that, right? It's right. It's putting politicians in situations that they are making the choice to do right or wrong. That wrong can even be in the conversation here, and it's just it seems like we are just like it's too Wild West. Am I right?
Yeah, there's too many gray areas here, and there's too many loopholes and escape hatches to take advantage of. And so it's hard to pin anybody down for wrongdoing when the laws are so loose that you could drive a truck through them. And that's what we see. So you have people who get away with a little bit, and then they get away with a little bit more, and they get away with a little bit more, and then they keep going until they've crossed some line that the feds snap them up. Well, we shouldn't have the kind of laws that are so easy to press to see how far you can push it, and there doesn't seem anybody willing to tighten the guardrails, and that's a major frustration. It happens for years and years. It's been going on decades, and they'll tweak things here and there over the years. Every once in a while, there's a push after Blagojevich or Pat Quinn put together this Illinois Reform Commission, but they still weren't able to accomplish a lot of the recommendations that this commission came out with. Before that, we saw even Barack Obama and Kirk Dillard and Mike Lawrence and the Paul Simon Public Institute in Southern Illinois University were able to put into place some changes, but over the years they just don't keep ethics and improving ethics and campaign finance laws at the top of the agenda, and it was our responsibility to tell people about it. It doesn't fit the narrative they want, but it is a reality and it is truth.
What sort of reforms are actually in the ether here that could help things? I've long said that limiting campaign contributions from certain people would make a difference. I've said that fixing the financial disclosures that are just complete crap that the lawmakers and government officials have to fill out. They don't tell you anything about where their money's coming from. That those are two places to start. What are the good government advocates actually asking for in terms of reforms?
Well, there's a whole series, and we really don't have the 2 hours to tick through them, but I'll give you a quick synopsis. They've lobbied to increase the disclosure of lawmakers' conflict of interest, when they're taking a vote, or whether they should be able to take a vote on some things that are very close to them. Right now, they can not say anything, or they can declare a conflict and vote any way they want. They want to give greater authority to the legislative inspector general. There's a bill up in committee this week, I believe it's today, that deals with expanding some of the power of the executive inspector general. That's the one that oversees the administration, but that doesn't deal with the legislature themselves. And so they're loosey-goosey standards there for the legislative inspector general. They want to set standards to prevent illegal coordination between candidates and independent political action committees. These are the super PACs. There have been instances where questions have arisen over whether candidates are coordinating with these super PACs, but when push comes to shove, it has come up in the State Board of Elections that, hey, there's no real definition of what coordination is, so it's pretty hard to hold somebody to that standard. They also talked about banning contributions. They've banned contributions from red light cameras, but they haven't talked about banning contributions from public utilities, which we just saw in the Madigan trial was part of the deal, where the ComEd was shelling out not only campaign contributions, but they were shelling out money to pay basically ghost payrollers that were Madigan cronies. So there's a variety of things that could be done. And like I said, the list is long.
Before we let you go, Ray Long of the Trib, I assume Emil Jones III will be back in Springfield starting today after a mistrial in his bribery case. I was skeptical of this one, specifically as the trial went on, because it seemed that the ask from Omar, is it Omar Mani?
Yes.
Omar Mani,
that
caught on tape. It was Jones not saying, give me $5,000 or get it to me, or give me some gabagool, mafia style. It was, can you raise me $5,000? And I come from politics, so I've sat around and heard my candidates over the years ask for contributions all day long. I mean, that didn't sound criminal to me. So were you surprised that the jury had a hard time with this one?
I was not. In fact, I said on a Chicago radio station before the case even went to the jury that the jury would have to do some hard thinking on this, because this was not a cut and dried case. And I noted that specific thing that you just said too, when Omar Mani pressed while he was taping Jones. Jones finally said, well, you could raise me $5,000, which is not like saying, give me $10,000 in a cash envelope by any stretch of the imagination. So he also asked for hiring his intern too. And that was something that is minor in the grand scheme of things here. This is the kind of stuff that you really are scratching your head and wondering why the feds actually brought this case. In fact, Jones had said that they had, when he testified, he did a good job on the stand. And when he testified, he said, hey, I was just looking out to see if he could help out my intern, and I wasn't asking for a bribe or anything like that. And he may have convinced some of the jurors, and so they couldn't come up with a unanimous verdict either way, so they declared a mistrial.
And Ray, before we let you go, the feds had initially asked for Mike Madigan to forfeit $3.1 million that had been paid out to his cronies. and part of the things he was convicted for. And then we saw a filing late Friday that poof, they're not asking for it anymore. I guess my simple question is, what happened?
Yeah, we're still trying to get to the bottom of that, but maybe it's strategy that the feds think that they're going for a tough sentence, and this could hurt their chances on appeal or something. I don't know. That's total speculation, but they did not give much of a hint as to why they did this, and this is one of the things that we hope we'll eventually be able to get to the bottom of it. But that's $3.1 million. There are $3 million that Madigan doesn't have to worry about.
Does this end with him in prison?
Who knows? Who knows, really? It all depends on the judge and how he interprets the issues that are in the case. But he could face several years in prison for sure. And that is something that they're trying to avoid. He just turned 83 earlier this month.
Wow.
And even, I will say he's a very healthy looking 83, as he always has been that guy who eats the apple for lunch. But it is something that is in John Robert Blakey, the judge's hands, and we'll just have to wait and see how he comes out.
Ray Long from the Chicago Tribune, our good friend. Ray, thanks for the time as always, and we'll catch up with you again soon, okay?
Good to be here. Thank you.
All right. Well, I hope you found as much value in these conversations as I did, and we'll see you on the next episode of The Cole Memo. Take care, everybody.